Welcome to Rooted to Thrive, conversations to elevate our humanity. I'm your host, Rochelle Peterson-Ansari, Professor P for short. This is your podcast sanctuary for cultivating mindsets and skills to elevate our shared humanity. We're taking a deep dive into practical strategies to evolve as anti-racist, culturally competent, and inclusive individuals and leaders. In each episode, we're bringing you real-world examples and actionable takeaways. We're going to talk about personal growth, fostering connection, and creating positive change that dismantles systemic barriers and creates environments where all of us are valued, empowered, and activate our collective power. This is Rooted to Thrive. Hi there. Welcome and welcome back to everyone joining us on the Rooted to Thrive Conversations that Elevate Our Humanity podcast. I am your host, Rochelle Peterson-Ansari, aka Professor P. Today, we have Dr. Olufemi Fadeyibi. Yes, current administrator in Lower Merion High School, CEO of Uplift Educate, mentoring programs and curricular resources. Olufemi has been an English teacher, school leader at public and charter schools. He's an expert in policy and leadership and organizational studies, and he focuses on high leverage mentoring interventions that close the achievement gap. Folks, did you hear me? We're not talking about trying. They close the achievement gap. It is such an honor to have you today. Should I call you Olufemi or Dr. Fadeyibi?
Olufemi.
Olufemi. All right, excellent. How are you doing today?
Rochelle, I'm doing very well, Professor P. It's an honor to be here. Such a privilege. Just looking forward to sharing expertise and hopefully something that listeners can take away and implement into their practice.
Yes, love it, love it, love it. That's all we want to do here. So to get started, please share like just a little bit about your background and how you got involved in this work.
Sure, and that's a great question,
Mhm,
Professor. So it all kind of goes back to when I was in fourth grade.
mm,
I was in a school, in a public school, and the teacher was taking roll, and the teacher said everyone's name correctly
mm,
until they got to my name. And as you know, Olufemi Fadeyibi is not the most common name in this country. So when the teacher got to my name, they took a big pause. Didn't really sound like they tried to pronounce it correctly. And all of the kids burst out laughing. And it was a day for me because both of my parents migrated from Nigeria to this country. It was a day for me that I pushed away part of my identity because of that trauma that happened. So, fast forward to college, I fast forward to my graduate program in urban education at Temple. I was an English major in undergrad and English education major in undergrad. And I had a class in my master's program that was really difficult and challenging. It was heavy conceptual, theoretical, and I wasn't used to work like that. And I remember thinking to myself, and this is the sad part, but this is what projected me into the work. I remember thinking to myself that black men like me can't make it in
mm,
a class like this.
mm,
And that was tough,
mm,
because my identity didn't give way to me thinking I was intelligent.
mm,
So my identity as a black man, as an African American male in this country, didn't give me the fortitude in my thinking to think that I had what it takes academically to persist and do well in a difficult class that was highly cognitive, highly academic, highly theoretical. at that time, I met my wife who we started dating, and it kind of brought me back. She's Nigerian. She came to this country when she was 18. It kind of brought me back to part of my Nigerian identity that I disassociated with after that fourth grade experience.
Mhm.
And when I embraced parts of my Nigerian identity, and Uncle so and so is a researcher, Auntie so and so is a CPA. This Nigerian person has done this academically and that and this and terminal degrees, and it's commonplace. That boosted my belief in my own academic ability.
Mhm.
So I persisted and I finished graduate school, master's, then I went on to finish my doctorate. And I was teaching, as I was teaching in the inner city, in what used to be termed persistently dangerous schools
Mhm.
that were majority African American, I realized that my students, they loved me because I played basketball in college and I would, play with them at lunch and after school and come down to their gym class sometimes. And when I would beat them, they would all say, "Oh, Fadeyibi got game. Fadeyibi beat you, Jawan. Fadeyibi beat you. You corny, you corny." And you know how that goes, but it built rapport. And so these same black boys that would do well in my class because I had rapport, they weren't doing well in other classes.
Mhm.
And one of the things was that they didn't believe that they were capable. And another thing was that sometimes, a lot of times, they didn't see how education would shape their possible future self.
Mhm.
And so to not believe in you're capable is a motivational construct. If you believe you have competency in something, you're more likely to persist in that.
Mhm.
But because the talents and the accomplishments of Black men in this country are so hidden from the curriculum, the social cues in society, tell African American boys you're not intelligent, you're hyper violent, that's what it tells them.
Mhm.
You're
Mhm.
involved in criminality, that's what it tells them. You could be entertainers or athletes. You could do those things well, but anything that comes to academic or scholarly work, that's not for you. So I really thought about this concept in the same way I became motivated when I tapped into part of my other identity. How could I bring this to the boys, the males that I come across so often that have so much potential to soar, but they don't believe that
Mhm.
it's innately in them when it is. But
Mhm.
all the cues, maybe not all, but many of the cues in society are telling them opposite.
Yes. Yes. And you mentioned, so you said, you, your self-efficacy was diminished when something happened in school.
Right.
Were the boys that, and you mentioned building rapport as one strategy. That's one thing that helped them connect and hear from you,
Sure.
right? Like it allowed you to teach them.
Sure.
It was a,
Absolutely.
yeah. Uh, what are some of the things that the boys are telling you besides the social cues outside of school? What are some of the cues they're getting in schools that are telling them they're
So,
hyper violent, they're criminals, they are
sure.
not academic?
So I think not only do these cues affect the boys, but they affect educators. They affect the people in school.
Mhm.
And so I've been at suburban schools, I've been at inner city schools. I think that if I come with the bias that certain kids can do better than others, and I haven't checked my bias, and I might not even know my bias exists, right? Then my expectations
Mhm.
may not be to the same level. And so, you know, Do I think it's intentional a lot of times? Absolutely not. But I think what we believe about who is in front of us in all sectors has a direct implication of what we expect and our, how can I say this? And our, what we expect and the way that we try to help those students reach expectations.
Mhm.
So I'm going to say if I know I have LeBron James' son and who else? Steph Curry's son, and I'm a coach and they don't do well in this one drill, but I know for a fact that, they're it's in their lineage and that these things are reachable. I'm not going to be okay with certain things. You might have a bad day on the court shooting, but I know, even though I haven't seen it demonstrated, I know your lineage. I know what you're capable of to a degree. I push.
Mm.
So the cues that come in school are the same cues that from the environment and from society, the same way that I've had students tell me that we're just some dumb black kids. I believe might be the same cues that are in other places and that are expressed differently.
Yeah, yeah. I get that. And, I've worked with educators for years, have been an educator at the higher ed and college and university level for years, and worked with out of school time programs as well, really since the early 90s. And I also settled on, focusing my work with educators on who we are, right? Like we teach who we are. And what I mean by that, right, is that part of who we are is how we have been socially constructed, right? To believe who we are and who
Right.
other people are. Yes. And
Yeah,
so that just, that struck a chord for me because it's clear that individuals who have responsibility, the great responsibility, we entrust our children to, um, have to understand, like they have to understand that we're walking into every room with the racism we've been taught, the
yeah,
disability oppression, the sexism, gender oppression, religious oppression. All of that comes in the door with us if we have not done the work to check,
absolutely.
yes, to check our biases, um, to check how we were socialized, right? And it's the number one thing that I think is missing from teacher education programs, by and
That's
large,
such a good
right?
point.
Not all of them, but it's
That is
missing.
such a good point.
It's
Absolutely.
actually missing from every industry and needs to be there,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. I had this
Yeah.
I had a transformative experience. So it was my first year and I was teaching at a school that was 100% free and reduced lunch qualified. Um, One of the students fell ill. It was my second year of teaching. It was the first year in this school.
Mhm.
So I went and dropped off the textbook at his home. When someone came to the door, teeth were missing. Young, you could tell it might have been some sort of addiction going on.
Mhm.
The house, um, it just it wasn't what I was used to, right? And it would be a hard condition for anyone to live in. And it was a transformative experience because I grew up middle class, right? And most teachers grow up middle class.
Mhm.
Most teachers don't grow up in poverty, you know? And so walking into that space and going into the house and meeting the child's family, I understood better what I needed to do to be able to help that child. But sometimes as educators, unknowingly we just think that children sometimes they're just refusing to be educated.
Mhm.
Like they're refusing to want to learn, right? And so sometimes you hear teachers say these kids, always a red flag for me, right? Like these kids don't care. And it showed me that there's always a story behind actions. But now to be an effective educator, what would I have to do pedagogically, right?
Mhm.
In a way that's responsive or relates to um, things that students can grasp, that I can transfer the content that I'm trying to teach, but also the rapport building and the empathy, right? And the non judgmentalism, because students can feel
Mhm.
that.
Yes.
Students can, like, just like adults. If you're condescending, if you think someone thinks they're better than you, we
Mhm.
project what we believe, you know? So it was a really transformative moment for me because I was at a point where I was almost like, these kids don't care, you know? But when I realized the story and started to realize the story more and more, it's almost like things are stacked up against them for them to focus on being educated and reaping the benefits of education.
Yes, yes. And I don't want it to be lost on our listeners. I don't think you're saying that, oh, you live in poverty, there's always addiction. There's always these, that things are stacked up against you in your home. There's great things happening in many homes, right? But
Absolutely.
when you are living in poverty, you are under-resourced.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, that translates into our schools as well,
Big
right?
time.
Yeah. And if you are surrounded by people who have a low sense of worth, or, their own self-efficacy, that rubs off on you too. Yes.
Correct.
And with the mind of a child, right? The brain is not fully developed until we're about 25 years old. With the mind of the child, you are going to act out in different ways that align with what you're learning, or it could be that you're resisting it
Absolutely.
and can't even articulate it. So I get
Hmm.
it, right?
Yes.
I get
Yes.
it. Yeah. So this brings me to the title of our podcast, right? Like, we're having conversations to elevate our humanity. When you heard that title of the podcast, what came to mind for you in terms of the work that you do, right? And helping people understand beyond stereotype threat, how to
Sure.
help our young people.
Sure. Sure. That's a great question. So Steele and Aronson, they were researchers in the 80s and 90s, and still till to this day, but they came
Mhm.
up with the concept stereotype threat. And stereotype threat is when the group you identify with is
Mhm.
portrayed in such a negative manner that you believe the portrayals of the group are innate to your characteristics.
Mm.
So whatever this group is portrayed as, that's what I am. And so I thought about how, with elevating humanity, what can schools leverage to really improve the engagement of
Mm.
students? Because if students are engaged, then they'll learn. But
Mhm.
there are a lot of barriers that come to being engaged. And one of them, I think one of the greatest ones is, how does education tie into my possible future self? And am I able to compete or to excel in this thing we call school? Is it relevant? And am I able to do it?
Okay. So is it relevant? How does it tie to my possible future? And giving them ways to, excuse me, integrate it with what they know so that they know they can do it.
Absolutely.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. So, so we're strengthening the youth, right? Children and youth
Correct.
by these strategies. how how can the people in these educational settings strengthen their muscles, right? Their anti-racism muscles, their cultural competence in any manner, or their inclusive practices. You can pick one, all.
Sure. No, that's a
Yeah.
good question. So I've run mentoring programs because I think mentoring is a great way to really build whatever you're trying to build that takes away. It's not necessarily a content class. Um,
Okay.
Common Core and testing, they've kind of done away with some of the freedoms you have in instructional time because a lot of times in urban schools, you're graded by your test results, your standardized test results. So I think one of the ways is exposing students, and it sounds really simple, and it kind of is, but it's exposing students. Representation matters. It's exposing students to people who they identify with their group, and
Mhm.
showing the students that there's so many people that have come from backgrounds similar but have still excelled and have still thrived and have used education as a launching pad into amazing careers. And that's the thing. I don't think there's enough representation
Mhm.
in the classroom, one, and then also kids coming from socially isolated neighborhoods at times where they don't get to experience other professions of people that look like them that have made it. So if you can expose a child
Mhm.
and then the child's imagination starts to say, hey, that could be me. I could be that lawyer that's coming. I could be that professor, that Mark Lamont Hill that's coming and talk to us. I could be that Ben Crump. I could be that Eric Holder lawyer. I could be, the millions of or thousands of accountants, uh, sports agents, physicians that are black, that are brown. If I start to expose the children to that at an early age, then that starts to become a goal.
Mhm.
And then when the goal hits, and I see that to get to that goal, I need school, then engagement, because now school starts to make sense for my possible future. It's not just, I have to do reading, I have to do social studies, I have to do math. It becomes okay, this is a means to my end. And now that I've fully envisioned that end, me sitting in that role, this is how and what I need to get there, and engagement improves. And that's what I've
Yes.
seen over and over again in these mentoring programs. So we would have discussions surrounding resiliency and determination and vision.
Mhm.
We would have discussions and read text of other black and brown men who had come from tough circumstances at times, but were still able to persist and reach a goal. Then we bring in speakers. So, what I'm trying to do is create vision of why school is important. And the students, they love to ask questions and they ask great questions. But one of the greatest questions they would always ask is, and I thought it was interesting, is how much do you make? Right. And
Okay.
sometimes people would give a ballpark area, but the students were always astounded. They were always astounded. Teachers are definitely underpaid, but they would think teachers make $5, $6 an hour. It's not true. It's not true at all. Or one kid told me as an administrator in a suburban school, when he looked at my degrees, they were on the wall. He said, Fadeyibi, you have these degrees. How much do you make? And when I gave him a range, at first he started at $10, right? As an administrator in a suburban school. And I said, make a little bit more than that. And then he kept going up, and around the range, he said, wow, you make that much. What degree got you that? And
Mm,
so now he was starting to put the pieces together that there's upward mobility with being educated. So I
right.
think it's super important that they see people that look like them and they also know the benefits of what being educated, not only for upward mobility, but to empower you also to give back to your community,
Yes.
you know?
Ah, okay.
So,
Yes. Yes. And many Black and Brown communities, right, believe in that, right? Believe that our work in the world should support our communities.
absolutely.
Many religious communities have that as a core value as well. But I wanted something that is running in the back of my mind as you're talking. What I'm hearing you say is we must counter the narrative,
Absolutely.
that a narrative is running in their minds that was created by other people,
Correct.
or at least it was catalyzed by other people. They internalized it, and the people that do not have they have an academic identity, but not a positive one,
Sure. Sure.
often have received the social cues that it's not, that they're not even capable. And
That's
just even exposing them to other people who have, who had humble beginnings like they did, or not, but used education to get to tapping into what the young person wants. And at their ages, they're looking at money,
right.
right? By and large, they're looking at money. I humbly hope that they grow into people who see their service beyond, be in the world, beyond, and their innovation beyond the money. That I believe that will come.
Sure. Absolutely.
But yes, with a college education, with terminal degrees comes more money in some cases,
Right. Right.
right? Because there's some competition out there,
Absolutely.
right? But besides the athletics, right? There's competition out there now where, in technology, you need to know what you're doing. And people aren't necessarily hiring for the educational background.
Right.
However, there are things that you learn in that space.
There it is.
Yeah, there are things that you learn in that space in higher education that many people won't have, right?
Sure.
Um,
Hmm.
and
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 Rochelle,
I would say is valuable. Yes, go ahead.
and the thing too, even engaging, our brain is a muscle.
Yes.
So when we engage in complex tasks, thinking, our critical thinking, our ability to problem solve. I mean, if you are engaging versus not engaging, and don't get it wrong, like there are different tiers to quality education, and the quality of education in some areas versus different areas varies greatly. Resources, um, that's huge. So that has a part to play. And when we talk about equity, that definitely has to be in a conversation. There's some districts in Pennsylvania that are close to 30,000 per student,
Yes.
regular education students, while other districts and schools in PA are getting 12,000.
Mhm.
Like that's a huge difference when we talk about the quality of text, the education, technology, the resources,
Mhm.
the ability to attract high quality teachers because this district can pay more, the facilities maintenance, the I mean, there's a
Mhm.
lot that goes with more money for your district that also plays a role in educating the student. But just if you were engaging
Mhm.
at different levels, it's going to make your brain sharper and stronger. And it's going to help you increase the skills that the workforce is demanding.
Yes. Yes. Now, you talked about your mentoring programs, and you said you wanted to separate it out from the academic subjects, but you are actually teaching academic skills
Mm,
in a mentoring program. I took a peek at your website. I saw workbooks on there. I saw, yes, if you're even delineating the life story and the educational and career trajectory of another person, people have to read that
sure,
book.
absolutely.
Can you provide an example of a successful initiative, like a, you've had some positive results as a result of a mentoring program?
Absolutely. There
Yeah.
are many, quantitatively and
Hmm.
qualitatively.
Okay.
Uh, when I was teaching at Martin Luther King, an English teacher, I um I really felt led after reading some scripture to start a mentoring program, and I was like, I can't do that. I am first year of my doctoral program. Um, I just had my first child with my spouse. And no, I'm not doing that. But anyway, I did it, right?
Okay.
And we took 12 of the most at-risk students at Martin Luther King that year. 12 of the most at-risk boys. Um, Suspensions were high. Um, their overall GPA was really low. I think it was maybe a 0.65 or 0.95. A lot of the students were failing. Um, in school, they were getting in trouble. They weren't bad kids, but they weren't bad, and it's no but. They just weren't focused. They didn't see how education could impact their future selves. So every Friday after school, we would read a text about a black man who made it. The text was called Brother to Brother, and it was about black men in Philly. And we would, black men who grew up in Philly and did something. So when they would mention Strawberry Mansion or, the areas they were familiar with, they were like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then how that person talked about education and making good choices. So by the end of that semester, after reading that book, after having speakers come in, project managers, lawyers, other educators, um, at the end of that semester, their GPA as a collective, it was trending upward. And when we compared it to the GPA of the other ninth graders who were not in the mentoring program as a collective, their GPA was actually trending downwards. And what's interesting is during that time of the school year, traditionally in all schools, GPA, when spring starts and the weather starts to break, GPA usually goes down, right? But their GPA was trending upward. And it was such a shock to me because I didn't know, like, I didn't know anything was going to happen. So when we looked at the quantitative data, and then where the statistician at Temple was like, this is statistically significant. Like this is not happening by random. There's something that's motivating this to these kids to improve their GPA. I knew like I was on to something. And from then at other schools, when I was at Penn Treaty and I started a mentoring program in Penn Treaty, out of all the public schools, in the city of Philadelphia, the black and brown boys in that ninth grade cohort, their GPA increased. The ninth grade, black and brown boys in the entire ninth grade, and a majority of them were in the mentoring program.
Mhm.
They had the highest growth in the entire school district for students that had all A's, B's, and C's in a major in a content area. So it's something called the on track metric for school district of Philadelphia. The black and brown boys of that grade,
Mhm.
many of them were in the program, had the highest increase for on track, having A's, B's, or C's in all of their major subjects. So that was
Wow.
really good. And then we've seen
Wow.
stuff with the academic identity at a charter school in
Mhm.
Philly, urban charter school,
Mhm.
students that were in the sixth grade cohort. We looked at their academic identity before the program and after the program, how they felt about their intelligence.
Mhm.
And we saw growth in that. We've seen growth in the lessening or decrease of disciplinary referrals.
Mhm.
And one thing that I'm really happy about, it's not often measured, but in that same charter school where we ran the mentoring program, there's a metric that measures the strategies that you're incorporating at the moment to get to the possible future self you desire. So a lot of the students said, I want all A's.
Mhm.
I want all A's and B's. I don't want any suspensions. I don't want this or I want that. Something in the very proximal future, something close. So they would give their aspirations, but then we measured the strategies that they self-reported that they were incorporating to get to that during the mentoring program. The strategies that they self-reported grew exponentially, that they wanted to get to that goal. And many of them got to that goal because they were cognizant of the strategies that they were incorporating or needing to incorporate to get to that possible future self.
Mm.
So it's been a lot of growth.
Wonderful. Do you remember some of the strategies? I was curious as soon as you said it, like, what did they do?
Sure. So one simple one is not to sit close to my friends during class
All right.
because they know that they'll talk.
Mm-hmm.
As I talked a lot and I got in trouble a lot, a whole lot. That's for another another session. Other
Okay.
strategies was like I'm going to spend a quantitative amount of time doing homework. So I'm going to spend 15 minutes or 25 minutes to do homework. Other
Mm-hmm.
strategies were I'm going to see the teacher during lunch so I can get extra help with the content area. But
Mm.
so they would list them now and they would see that they would list them and they were implementing strategies. Whereas before, they might have had these goals or possible future selves that they wanted, but when they reported, self-reported before the program, they weren't putting any strategies at times or very minimal strategies to get there, or they didn't even at times have a goal because they've never really been in school shape to think about what is your goal for this semester. What do you want
Mhm.
to improve on, or what do you want to
Mm.
reinforce? What do you want to strengthen? What do
Mhm.
you want to achieve at times? And not all
Mhm.
students need that, but when you're thinking about your most vulnerable students that have been told you're not academic, right? Or that this has no relevance to your future education, it was game changing
Mhm.
for them.
Yeah.
We saw the
Yeah.
results.
So having a vision,
Exactly.
right? Envisioning your future self. I mean, what else is out there, right? Like there's so many things out there about visioning, vision boards and so
Absolutely.
forth. And exposure. And what I hear you saying is exposure to people like you who have these futures that you might consider helps
Yeah.
helps our young people, right? Because it's not just for boys,
Right. Right.
right? Helps our young people see themselves. Yeah, I'd done some research some time ago, and we were looking at a global education course,
Hmm.
and one of the tools, one of the stories that we incorporated into the course had to do with immigrant families, right? Like, or immigrants, and the power that their family stories had on their level of resilience. Like they knew they could
Mm.
make it or overcome adversity because great grandpa did. Like great
Sure.
grandpa, grandma came from a whole nother country. I don't even need to
Mm.
do that.
Sure.
Right. So
Sure.
knowing that people who came before you, who you identify with, whether they are your natural family or not,
Sure.
has power.
Absolutely.
And I hear you saying in the mentoring program, I can just only assume you all were teaching those strategies or sharing those strategies with the young people, right? Like, or maybe they were coming up with it on their own. You correct me if I'm wrong. Like if a young person said to you, I know that I'm just not going to sit next to my friends because I get distracted. Were you suggesting that directly, or were you just asking them to think of ways to not
Sure.
be distracted?
Sure. That's a good question. So we would break them up in pairs as they were going over their goals,
Hmm.
right? So they could sit, it was more discussion based, but they were coming up with the strategies on their own. And sometimes they would come and ask us, how can I do better in understanding something?
Hmm.
And then we would give them options or strategies that they could choose. But most of it was their own self reflection.
Yes. And
They're
that's
so
powerful too.
talented and they're
Yes.
and so intelligent and so wise that they're fascinating and complex. But unfortunately, when they only believe that they're good at certain things, because that's what society and people, and we're not reinforcing that they're good in other things, the academic, the cognitive, the complex thinking things, scholarly identity, then they have a trajectory to work, their behaviors match what they believe about themselves. And that's for anybody in
Yes.
any
Right.
context,
That's
you
right.
know? So I once heard
Hmm.
Muhammad Ali say when they asked him about boxing and they asked him about losing matches, he said it never crossed his mind to lose a match.
Mm.
And so that type of thinking, because I'm the greatest, right? His training and his behavior matched what he felt about his ability. And that's what the
Mm.
shift has to be. I believe in high quality teaching, it's needed.
Mhm.
Uh, Rising to expectations, that's needed. That's needed. High quality
Mhm.
teaching. But before we can get there, you have to have students that believe in themselves. And my question a lot of times is, to what extent is the school responsible for building the academic identity of its most at-risk students?
Mhm.
And I think that's what we have to think about, because you can keep giving the same assignments, you can try to make it more relevant, which will help, definitely help. But if at the core a child doesn't believe this will benefit them or that they can't do it, it's gonna be a it's gonna be hard to win that
Mhm.
battle.
Right. And so your question was, to what extent is the school responsible for building academic identity? Yeah, I'll weigh in.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
I'm going to say even I'll give it 90% because
Mm,
it's compulsory to go to school
sure,
to a certain age in the United States of America. We require it for a reason, right? We say
sure.
to some degree that you absolutely need this education in order to be a responsible citizen. So would would our schools not be responsible for who who the people become? And one's academic identity certainly is an indicator. I talk about how my scholarly identity was nurtured when I was in school years ago, when I was in elementary school, until I took it on myself. Actually, I took it on from the beginning because people believed in me.
Mm,
People told me you are smart. And I was like, yeah, to a point where you could not ever tell me otherwise.
mm.
To this day, I believe I can learn most things. And when I step back from something, it's because it's a choice. Like, I don't want to spend my energy that way. I
Sure.
get it.
Sure.
Right. And so in the United States, when we don't want to expend energy in a certain way, but we still need the thing, we have to have the funds to pay somebody else to do it, period.
Hmm. Period.
Right. So, but yeah, my scholarly identity was formed by the adults around me. And I was fortunate to have that consistent message. teachers, administrators. It also came with some currency that actually wasn't fair to others.
Mm,
Okay. So, to be the kid that is in the top track, the honors track, etc., I actually also was given the benefit of the doubt
sure, sure,
when I was doing things I wasn't supposed to do.
sure.
That was not fair to others, right? And so they get labeled like somehow your academic ability has something to do with your level of integrity,
Mm,
or that you're going to, there's a direct
sure.
connection to, like you said, criminality, like thinking people, that's what people have been doing for years. Their children and youth are experiencing that today. And I experienced that, and people I went to school with experienced it many decades ago. So that is something that's still at the core, I will say, in public education. I had that experience in public and in private
Sure.
educational spaces. So I would believe that I believe, I don't even know that it's a question, right? That of course we're responsible as
So
educators.
here's the other part. The other part is I'm just here to teach the content.
Mm,
What you feel about yourself is what that's not my responsibility. I'm here to teach you how to solve this equation. I'm here to teach you how to identify the central point or central author's view or this trigonometry function. That's the argument. Like, to what level? And I have an answer, and my answer is very similar to yours. But the other answer is some students who have a high academic identity, some racial ethnic groups come in with a high ethnic identity, racial ethnic identity. So if we're not going to empower them to reinforce that, why are we doing this for this group that? And so it becomes, and it
mhm,
can almost be politicized, but
right.
just like you said, if our job is, with one of the jobs in education is to create citizenry, right?
Mhm,
And we know that if they have a higher belief in themselves, they're more likely to engage, which usually will lead to you won't you won't be looking make well
mhm.
yeah, which usually leads to abiding more, right,
Right,
in our society. um yeah, so
right.
but
Yeah,
there's just another view. And like I said,
yeah,
if I'm a teacher and I grow up and I didn't need anyone to empower me or to build my academic identity, I might feel some sort of way. Well, I didn't need that growing up. And that's what most teachers we do. Unfortunately, unless you really do that reflective work as you started off in the beginning, what are my biases? Like, what do I think about things for real?
right. And I also think that lack of introspection, people don't understand that they didn't do it alone.
Mm.
They did not do it alone. Parents, grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
aunties, uncle, people, and the other social cues
Yep.
told you whether you were valuable, whether academic
Mm-hmm.
identity was a part of who you are. Yes, there were cues. There are teachers who had high expectations of you. It was assumed, but it was around you so much. It was like breathing in the air. You couldn't see it. I get it. I did the work to go back and see that I didn't get like this by myself.
I love that. I love it.
I had educational privileges that they should be rights, but in the context that we're in, they were privileges.
Mm.
And it was because, interestingly enough, because I did like school the way it was delivered, and I gave back what people expected of me. So then I got more
Sure,
resources.
sure,
I got more attention. I got more praise. All those things every child needs, every youth needs in that space, yet we give up on them so easily.
true.
Yeah. The people who need us to pour in them the most are the ones that we have pulled back on, pulled away from, thinking, oh, it's just you or you're not capable. When I think of somebody talking about content, I'm like, did just a brain walk into your classroom? Like, I know that that's how they were taught to teach.
Sure,
Something's missing.
sure.
Yeah,
It is.
something's missing.
It is.
You're teaching a human being, not content.
Mm, mm.
Yes,
Yes, I
it's a
agree.
it's a spirit, it's a soul, it's a person.
Rochelle, it's
Hmm.
really funny because I've had a chance to be in different spaces that are juxtaposed when it comes to socioeconomics or demographics of different school settings.
Hmm.
And in some spaces, right, it's, I don't want, it sounds wild, but I don't want you teaching to my whole child. I just want you teaching the content. So my child can get to Stanford, my child can get to Penn. They need that SAT score, they need that GPA. So content, content, content. And in other spaces, and those kids suffer too, though. Don't get it
I
wrong.
was,
Just because they're going to Penn and Stanford, there there's a lot of suicidal ideation,
hmm
anxiety, um, depression, right?
hmm
But then there's the other camp where you teach, you're not teaching content because you're teaching everything, not everything, that's a bad way to say it, but you're only teaching maybe to the affective or attitudinal
right, right,
domain. So you're teaching kids to believe more in themselves, but your instruction might not be to the same level.
right.
So, finding this balance, right? How do I teach both? Like, how do I make sure my child is equipped academically and both in their psychological attitude about themselves? If we can merge and mesh those two things, education would be really, really, really powerful.
Yes,
It is a
and
powerful,
it is merged in so many places.
right?
You know, it is merged, right? And there are many people who are doing it and don't even know how they're doing it, right?
Mm,
Because it's natural for them.
absolutely.
I believe that's why a number of people will say that that Black children need Black teachers,
Absolutely.
because there are many Black teachers who will not judge them. And I don't get it twisted. There are some who will,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
but they see their child, they see their, this Black educator sees their child, they see
Sure.
their family member,
Yep.
and there's this belief, right, that they see beyond the social cues
Yes.
that allows them to pour in psychologically and socially into that person while holding a high standard for what they will learn academically.
Absolutely. I'm
Right.
in total agreement.
And
Absolutely.
so there are people bringing it naturally, but there are people who are not, that would not be the case. But can they do it? I believe they can. And
Sure.
I hear you saying they can as well. And so to close us out, you know, maybe it's reiterating what you shared already, but what advice would you give to our listeners, those who look like our children and those who do not?
Sure. And I would
Oh,
say the biggest thing, believe in high quality teaching. We need
mm-hmm,
that. We know the effectiveness of the child's teacher is one of the highest in school
mm-hmm,
factors that relate to their academic outcomes. If I
Yes.
have an amazing teacher in front of my child is more likely when they get in school to do better.
Mhm.
But one of the biggest attitudinal indicators of academic outcome is what they believe about the group they identify with, which
Mhm.
has an impact on what they believe about themselves.
Yes.
So I think for teachers, we need to do a lot of work on for educators about the biases that we hold and what do we believe about certain groups, and what we believe will always impact or affect our expectations. So
Yes.
that matters. And
Hmm.
then building the identity of the children in front of you is so important.
Hmm.
Like your students need to see that they're capable. They need to know they come from a long line of people that have contributed to the United States in so many ways, in so many ways. So it's your job as educator to make this child alive with the confidence that they can succeed, not only them, but also because they've come from a long line of people,
Yes.
their racial ethnic group, that have been doing this for years in this country. And they need to know that their group takes this seriously, takes being educated seriously. It's not a good narrative when we say some groups take this education seriously and others don't. The narrative, I mean, you know how false and misleading narratives can be, especially today,
Hmm.
January 20th,
Hmm.
2025, right? I'm interested in what narratives I'm going to hear in a couple of hours, but they're so important for what a child believes. And so, how do we unveil what's been hidden from them and their racial ethnic group so they can have more confidence in what they're capable of?
Yes. So bottom line is unveil what has been hidden from them.
Absolutely. And
Believe that they can.
absolutely. And Rochelle, that's what I came out with this curriculum.
Thank
It's a
you.
book called Donovan's World.
Donovan's
Um,
World.
it's on my website, www.uplifteducate.com, uplifteducate, one word.com. And it's about a 14-year-old black boy, and he's looking at all the possible future versions of himself. And what can he be? What can he become? What have his people contributed to the United States? What makes it unique? It's like a graphic workbook, so there are cool graphics in there, historical legacies of black and brown males in different professions.
Yes.
But not only that, helping them identify and overcome stereotypes that try to dismantle the academic competency, and then also keeping them away from dangerous situations. So it
Mm.
comes with a journal, which is really cool, and it comes with a big facilitator's guide for non-teaching professionals. And the cool thing, it recently just came out, but 14 schools have purchased it already to implement with their black and brown boys. So I'm really excited about that because I know if I had believed in myself earlier, right, my academic intelligence, I would have put more into school, and I wouldn't have doubted myself, and I wouldn't have discounted what teachers were trying to give me.
Wow. I want to thank you so much. And it all, I just keep going back in my mind that it all started with something that you felt spiritually led to do and
Yes,
doubted that you should even do it.
sure,
But
sure,
then you obeyed and said, okay, do I have an hour or two on a Friday once a week?
right.
That's where this was born.
Right. And it became my doctorate, my dissertation. It became the research I'm in. It's opened so many doors, but you hit it. I'm like, yo, I'm not doing this. And then I'm like, all right, I'll do it. And then it had an
Yes.
impact that has been helping students across the city of Philadelphia and even beyond. So thank you for
Excellent. Excellent.
recognizing that.
Yes. And now that this book is in 14 schools, it's also helping educators, right? The people
Yes.
using the guides or, the facilitators can't help but learn themselves.
Yes. Correct.
Yes, this
Correct.
is powerful. And, any educator that's not still a learner, I have questions about.
Hmm.
So, I hope they see that as a gift to themselves as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you again for being so generous with your time, with your expertise. Oh, is there a way for people to find you or contact you after this episode?
Absolutely. My name,
Hmm.
Olufemi. I'll spell it for you. O-L-U, F as in Frank, E as in Eagle, M as in Mike, I, Fadeyibi, F-A, D as in David, E as in Eagle, Y-I-B-I. You can find me on LinkedIn, Olufemi Fadeyibi, or you can go to my website, www.uplifteducate, one word.com.
Fantastic. And of course, your name will be spelled in the show notes and, and on the show title in the description. So people can find you on LinkedIn, although it is it's spelled phonetically.
Thank you.
Like I get it.
You should tell my fourth grade teacher that.
Okay. And thank you. I got it on the first try,
You
right? Like
did. You
I had
did.
to say it. And thank you to everyone who stopped by. Please leave a comment, subscribe, share this episode. And thank you again for listening to Rooted to Thrive.